For as long as I can remember, I've always loved shooting with Ektar 100. I can remember when I got my Nikon EM at the ripe age of 14, and Ektar was pretty much the only film I put through it. I think my brain fell into the marketing trap of being told that it's the sharpest film available, and so over the years, I've just grown to love it. Sadly, for some reason, and I'm not sure why, there seems to be this almost hate of Ektar by a lot of people. Everybody sort of jumps around and says Portra is the best film that I should ever shoot with, and you go on to pretty much any YouTube channel and it's all Portra this, Portra that. When I watched a YouTube video quite a few years ago now, and they introduced this thing called Ektar 25, my ears picked up because I had no idea it existed. A 25-speed Ektar with incredible sharpness sounded like the exact kind of film I wanted to be shooting. Only problem being, they stopped production of it in the mid-90s. So over the last 2 years or so, every time I see a couple of rolls of Ektar 25 pop up on eBay, I've been buying them and then just chucking them in the fridge, not knowing really what I want to do with them. That wasn't until recently when I finally decided, you know what, I want to actually see, is this film even going to work? Am I going to get any exposures? It's been 2 decades since the film's been in production. So a little while back, I put a roll of Ektar 25 through my Hasselblad X-Pen, and I got the results back. And without putting too fine a point on it, they blew my mind. Quite possibly some of the best images I've shot. Fast forward to today, and I've finished production of the first batches of the EB617 Mark II from orders on the web. And I got a couple of emails from people who were interested in purchasing the EB617, but a couple of people wanted to see the actual camera in use. They wanted to see it in the field. How does it actually work in a day-to-day scenario? So I thought, perfect time to shoot a film where I can shoot some Ektar 25, I can shoot a sort of a little bit more detailed use of the EB617, put the two together, got yourself a video. So first off, I travelled up to visit some friends in Wagga Wagga. For those of you who don't live in Australia, Wagga Wagga is a real place. And I thought I'd put the camera in the car, and on the off chance I see something along the drive, it's about a 5-ish hour drive from where I live. If there's anything I felt like shooting, I could just whip out the camera and have a go. I decided not to shoot the Ektar 25 at this stage because I really wanted to sort of take my time with it, with the Ektar 25, and set up a composition, and I really wanted to make that film work because I only have a couple of rolls of it in 120. So I popped a roll of Ektar 100 in the car, and driving up to Wagga, I managed to find a good old service station, as you always have to shoot with these cameras, that looked interesting and different, and so I thought it would be a perfect example to shoot. So I've got a very early start tomorrow. I want to shoot at sunrise, and there's nothing worse than trying to load film in the dark as you're chasing sunrise and you're rushing. And so I figured the best bet is I'll load my film tonight, so I'm ready to go in the morning. Now I'm going to load up this film back with some Ektar 25. Now this film expired in 1992, and the general consensus is for every 10 years you should add a stop to your film. So that would be roughly 2 stops. However, slower film tends to last longer over the years. So I think I'm going to rate this 25 film at 12. So just give it only the extra 1 stop, which should hopefully get me somewhere in the ballpark. And the other interesting thing is, as I'll be shooting at sort of just at dusk, sunrise, going to be probably dealing with some long exposures. However, there is no reciprocity information that I can find on the web about Ektar 25. However, it does actually list in the paperwork for the film that any exposures up to 10 seconds, there's no reciprocity failure. So, fingers crossed, I don't think I'm going to have to deal with reciprocity with this film, if I'm lucky. So I've got my film back here, and I'm going to go ahead and load that. Load that in here. It's a fairly simple process. Just make sure you've got your take-up spool on the right side. Open my 2-decade-old expired roll of Ektar 25. I really am hoping that this will produce at least some kind of photo. Oops, just dropped a bit of paper into the camera. Never a good thing. That's one of the joys of old film like this, is all of the glues and so on sometimes can get a little bit gummy. And then all you have to do is put it in there, make sure that it's registered. So you've got your film side facing out, the label side facing down, which is where your window will be. And then just feed it in like so. Once you've got a bit of motion. Now what I like to do is I actually like to take the dark slide out when I'm putting this plate on, just because there was one time where I loaded the film and for some reason the film hadn't laid it exactly straight and it caused it to catch on the edge here. That hasn't happened here. I can see that by, if I wanted to try and wind the film on a little bit, I can see that it's winding on fine. So I can pop my dark slide back in. I can screw back on my catches to hold the film back together. Open up my frame window and I can start winding on. Now the other thing I like to do, and this is just sort of a habit thing, is when you're winding on this side, so usually people will just wind with this one. I have found I like to just at least keep my finger on the fully loaded roll of film and just feel the tension, because there are some times where as you're winding on it can get a little bit tight, and I just like to give it a little bit of help just to push it on through. Most of the winding's done here, so you get a nice tight roll, but rather than just winding this side, and I just worry sometimes about, perhaps stressing all of the connections. So just leaving your finger on the edge, that usually is enough just to feel the tension. So I'm just going to go wind on to my first frame, which for these cameras is frame 2. So I've got my first arrow, first line, frame 2. All right, so that one is ready to go. Now you also see I've got another back here. This back I've got some Ektar 100 loaded into it. This is just my safety film. I figure if I'm going out and I'm going to be filming with, shooting with film that I don't know if it's going to even work, I don't really want to go all the way out there and have nothing to show for it. So I have a roll of Ektar 100 loaded as well. And this is probably a good example of one of the many benefits of 3D printing, is if you want to have more film backs, just print off another one. I mean, if you just one of these alone, it's probably $10 worth of filament, another $10 worth of hardware, and you've got another film back. Instead of if you buy a camera and you have to buy another film back, there's $700-800 per film back. You can print off as many film backs as you want, as you need. So I've got two here. I've got one with the black dials, one with the silver dials, just so I know the difference. So I know that my Ektar 25 is in the black dials and my Ektar 100 is in the silver dials. And so I am ready to shoot. After waking up at an ungodly hour and arriving at my location, I was ready to shoot. Now, unfortunately, the location that I actually had recce'd and I wanted to shoot, you can't get access to it until after 6:15, I think it is, when they open the gate, which is a little bit after sunrise. I would have liked to be able to set up and be ready so that as sunrise hit, I could fire off a frame just before sunrise and then a little bit after and so on. And that way I can see if there's any change, or there will be change, but see how the change looks on the film. But because I couldn't access the location immediately, I had a bit of time to kill. And, I saw a location that looked like it could be a shot. So I thought, might as well fire off a frame. And so even though I hadn't really recce'd it, I kind of pretty much just winged it. And it was an 8-second exposure, which was quite long. It was a bit windy. So when you really pixel peep the frame, there definitely is a little bit of motion. So it's not as sharp as it could be with an 8-second exposure. But luckily, because the Ektar 25 doesn't have reciprocity failure for anything less than 10 seconds, I didn't have to make any adjustments for that. So I was able to shoot an 8-second exposure on both Ektar 25. I did shoot it also on the Ektar 100 as a safety, but I have to say, the results from the 25, I was pretty happy with. Because the 105 is a new to me lens, I haven't really shot with it before. I decided that was going to be my first framing because the light wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be. And so I felt might as well, if I'm going to waste a frame, so to speak, might as well waste it on the lens in the setup that I wasn't really planning for. I wanted to wait for the light to get a little bit higher in the sky before I shot with my 210, which was the exposure I was looking to shoot. So I fired off a frame with the 105. Once again, it was a longer exposure. I think it was 4 seconds from memory. As you would expect with a pier, there was quite a few people fishing as sunrise. Now, trying to work around that so that they're not in frame and you can get a nice exposure can be challenging, and I'd never ask people to move. So finally, especially with the 105 being as how wide it was, I decided to lean into it. And I'd sort of hoped that if I could get a guy who was standing with his fishing rod, maybe there's a chance he might stand still enough that it will add to the exposure. Being a 4-second shot, my hopes weren't high, but luckily enough, when the negatives came back, he was as sharp as I would expect, considering, for a 4-second exposure. And I think it actually added to the frame rather than was something that I wished wasn't there. Interestingly enough, I also shot a frame a little bit after as my safety roll of Ektar 100, and he'd moved out of the frame by the time I shot the Ektar. And the frame, it doesn't look as good. Having that human element in the side of the frame really added to the exposure rather than being something that I wished wasn't there. My next exposure was with my 135. It's my safety lens. This was going to be my safety shot. The 135 is my bread and butter lens. It always works. I always get a nice sharp image. And so I felt that's going to be I'll shoot this frame, it'll be nice, safe. I know it's going to probably come out and look good, and then I can focus on getting the shot with the 210 and really dial that one in. I framed up the 135. The framing wasn't really where I'd been focusing all my attention, obviously with the 210, so I wasn't incredibly happy with the framing, but I was okay with it. I set up the shot and fired off a frame. The light was just about where I wanted it to be. I was really super focused on getting that one in the can so I could then move on to shooting the frame that I really wanted to shoot, which was with the 210. And then we came to the star of the show, the 210. This is the shot that I'd been planning for and I'd recce'd and I'd been thinking about for quite some time. So framing up my shot, the light just hit exactly where I wanted it to, and this is the result. So I hope you have enjoyed seeing the EB617 out in the field, much slower pace so I can show how I use the camera. There was a few comments from people saying that they loved all the options and so on the website, but the one thing that was glaringly missing were the bellows. I do have an instructional video on how to make bellows, but quite a few people have said it's a bit daunting and they really don't want to go down the bellows route. But I finally managed to find one company that produced a perfect set of bellows that I've been using, and I've been using on the main camera. So I've added those up onto the shop now, so that if you want to produce a camera or build your own camera, you can actually buy a set of bellows made by this company. The quality of them are significantly higher than you could really make yourself. So that's live on the website now. So hopefully there's pretty much everything you need now to produce a camera yourself. You can either just download just the models, or you can get the hardware kit, you can add in ground glass, you can add in bellows now as well. Or if you're, I don't want to say lazy, but if you just don't want to build a camera yourself, you can obviously purchase a fully built camera. So there you have it. I have to say, after looking at the exposures and jumping back and forth between them, I'm not sure if the 210mm shot, which was my planned shot, is my favorite. I keep going back to the 105mm shot, the one that I wasn't expecting to like, and that was really more just to test the new lens. I can't decide. But then I suppose that's the good thing about it. I don't have to decide. So that about wraps up the video. By all means, if anybody out there has some Ektar 25 that they want to offload, I'd be happy to take it off your hands. But otherwise, until next time, say hi to your dog for me.